This is an interesting question on motion and gravity. An aeroplane traveling parallel to the ground at a height of 1,000 meters and at a speed of 120 kilometers per hour releases an object when vertically over a certain spot. So in what time will the object hit the ground, and how far from the spot will the object hit the ground? This is actually a visual representation of the question that we have. First off, we know that the aeroplane is moving at 120 kilometers per hour, and it is 1,000 meters above the ground. That is the fact that we know from the question. Then all of a sudden, an object is dropped from the aeroplane. So how long would this object be in the air, and where exactly will it fall away from the spot? Perhaps most of us might think that when this object is dropped from the aeroplane, it should fall vertically downwards. Yes, exactly below the spot from which it was released in this way. This is what most of us might think. But according to physics, that is not what happens. This is not how the object is actually going to fall. We should remember that the object is actually moving at 120 kilometers per hour horizontally. Then this object is released. Now what happens is that when the object is released from this moving plane, it's going to acquire an initial horizontal velocity that will be the same as the velocity of the aeroplane at the point at which it was released. So that is what we should keep in mind. And this initial horizontal velocity is actually going to cause this bag not to fall exactly at the spot from which it was released, but fall away from the spot, depending on the initial horizontal velocity and the duration it stays in the air. So it's going to be something like this. So the bag is going to fall away from the original spot. So now that we get all of this cleared out, let's get back to our question. So in what time will the object hit the ground? Let's tackle that side first. There are so many interesting formulas when it comes to answering questions on motion and gravity. But for this particular question, the formula that we'll be using is this. H equals 1 over 2 gt squared. So that's what we'll be using. The H in this formula stands for the height of the aeroplane from the ground. And the G stands for gravity. Because when the object is dropped from that height, it's actually going to move with the initial horizontal velocity of the aeroplane and then fall under the influence of gravity. That is why we are going for this formula. So the H is the height of the aeroplane from the ground, which is 1,000 meters. And this will be equal to 1 over 2 times gravity. And gravity is 10. Although it has not been stated in the question, we know it to be 10 approximately times t squared. We are looking for t. The t here stands for the time it will take the object to hit the ground. So we would use this 2 to divide the 10, and that should give us 5. So we now have 1,000 meters equal 5t squared. So the next thing we do is to divide through using the 5. So 5. And that will give us 200 equal t squared. But remember, we are not looking for the square of time, but for time, we are looking for t and not t squared. So what we are going to do is to take the square root of both sides. So square root of 200 equals square root of t squared. So this square of the t is going to handle the square root sign, leaving us with only t. That means time is equal to the square root of 200. And what is going to be the square root of 200? The square root of 200 is 14.14. 14.14. So that means the object is going to be in the air for 14.14 seconds at the point from which it was released before it hits the ground. So we've actually solved the first part of our question. What about the second part of our question? How far from the spot will the object hit the ground? Remember that we've established the fact that the object is actually not going to fall below the spot from which it was released. It will travel a certain horizontal distance, and this depends on the initial horizontal velocity it has gotten from the airplane, and then the time spent in the air. And the time spent in the air is what we solved in A, which we got to be 14.14 seconds. So we're actually going to use that value. So let's let V to be the horizontal velocity of the object when it was dropped. So that gives us 120 kilometers per hour, which is the initial horizontal velocity of the object. So convert this to meters per second. That will be 120 times 1,000 divided by 3,600. So that will give us 33.33 meters per second. So this is the initial horizontal velocity of the object when it was released in meters per second. Now, how far from the spot will the object hit the ground? This is more of distance. And we know the formula that we'll be using will be horizontal distance will be equal to the speed that we've just converted to meters per second times the time the object spends in the air. And the speed is 33.33 meters per second times the time it spends in the air, which is 14.14 seconds. So 33.33 times 14.14 will give us approximately 471.4 meters. This is an approximated value. So that means the object will have 471.4 meters away from the spot where it was released. So these are the answers for the two questions that we have. Thank you very much for joining us on this quick lesson on motion under gravity, specifically answering questions on it. If you actually enjoyed this video, try to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to LearnersAid.